Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, news out earlier, Philippine manufacturing for May slows to 50.1. We make sense of it all with Jingyi Pan, Associate Director at S&P Global Market Intelligence, joining us live from Singapore. Coconut farmers seek more investment and support from the government to further the industry's growth. We speak with Charlie Avila, President of the Confederation of Coconut Farmers Organizations of the Philippines, or CONFED. And in world headlines, a suspect is now in custody in the attack on a demonstration in Boulder, Colorado for Israeli hostages who remain in Gaza. The Philippine manufacturing sector slows in May as foreign demand weakens. That is according to S&P Global. The country's Purchasing Managers Index fell to 50.1 from 53 in April, closer to the 50 mark that separates growth from contraction. Data from the S&P show new export orders saw their sharpest decline since November 2024. Meanwhile, job cuts were modest, but the marked steepest pace in nearly a year, with firms delaying hires or seeing voluntary resignations. Overseas, Japan's PMI edged up to 49.4, while Australia held steady above the 50 mark at 51. PMI data from Indonesia, Russia, and South Korea are expected later today. With us now for more is Jingyi Pan, Associate Director at S&P Global Market Intelligence in Singapore. Good to see you again, Jingyi. Welcome back to the program.
Well, good morning, Katie. Well, very glad to speak with you again at very interesting times.
It is very interesting times. So how did the conditions look like last month? Could you give us some color, your earliest insights in the Purchasing Managers Index just after the elections?
Well, thank you, Katie. So as you have mentioned, we did see in April the number for the Philippines manufacturing PMI showing solid improvement. And definitely, as you pointed out, election impact was underway. But moving into May itself, however, we've seen the number really close to stagnation. And this itself actually capturing manufacturing production, heading back into contraction territory. New orders growth has actually slowed as well. And I think this itself is altogether telling us about the conditions on the trade side that's actually impacting production for Philippines. And even though Philippines may not actually be as exposed to some of the other ASEAN economy to the US trade per se, but just due to the effect on trading partners as well, due to the tariffs, we're seeing some of the reports coming through from manufacturers stating that that is actually impacting conditions in the Philippines and more broadly as well. I think you mentioned in the region that's something that's not limited, of course, to the Philippines and to the other regions as well, including South Korea and Taiwan, where we've seen the numbers coming in really subdued this morning. And coming back to the Philippines, I think that impact definitely has also reached employment side. So you do see a shedding of staff in the manufacturing sector and at the fastest pace in a year. So it's really telling of the impact coming through so far.
It is
definitely
very telling, but if you make a comparison then, because we have a bit more data to analyze and just dive into, we are not so impacted as you say, but then there is stagnation. So what's causing that when you compare us with maybe more developed economies like Japan, Australia, which also came out with their own PMIs?
Yes, certainly. I would say that the situation for the Philippines is closer to stagnation, and that itself, with some of the front loading of the goods orders having already taken place in the month before. If we were to look at what's happening, say, for example, in Australia and also in Japan, where we have more data coming through, Japan definitely has been under lots of pressure, posting below the 50 point again, even though the subdued condition, the contraction actually moderated a little bit. In Australia, however, I would say that this situation is a little bit more like April for the Philippines, where you do have some of the impact coming through from the election, the federal election in Australia. So that condition itself is a little bit unusual from the typical situation. Broadly, I would say for the region, though, there is that U.S. tariff impact coming through a little bit more strongly in the May month compared to what we have seen in the initial announcement in April that has invited people to actually front load the orders. One thing I do, however, want to really point out to everyone on the show is that we did see sentiment actually improve in the Philippines as well. Business confidence actually picked up in May as compared to April when we first heard the US tariff announcements. And to that extent, I think it's showing some of this conviction that whereas things will actually improve with some of the negotiations, even though our predictions at S&P Global Market Intelligence, however, is for the fact that these negotiations is still going to take some time, even though we've seen some of the early positive developments, such as between US and mainland China.
All right, so we're closer to stagnation. You mentioned a bit about employment there and also a pivot to a more confident sentiment. How are consumers holding up, given that inflation isn't really there? In fact, it is projected to slow even further. Might that be a certain sort of an incentive for the economy to hang on to?
Definitely. So at least in terms of our projections for inflation in the Philippines, we do see things being rather in target, around the 2 to 4% target for the central banks. And that is something that in our PMI surveys, even though we did see a slight tick up, a very slight tick up in terms of our inflation or price indicators, that's still very much pointing to the inflation staying subdued in the year. And that is expected to support consumption to some extent if you do not see prices continue to tick up. Broadly as well, I think the expectation is for the central bank to actually further lower interest rates, the next one perhaps towards the second half of this year. And that is going to actually help to show up some of these interests, at least in terms of consumer interest, client interest, to pick up at least on the manufacturing side. The survey doesn't capture services, but at least in our prediction as well, we do see the tourism sector something that's going to actually help show up growth into the second half of the year and to reach our 5.6% GDP target for 2025, Katie.
Well, interesting silver linings you see there despite the slowing in May. Thank you so much, Jingyi Pan of S&P Global Market Intelligence, live in Singapore. You're watching Money Talks. Coming right up, petroleum exporting countries set to increase crude production. And the Trump administration downplays the impact of recent tariff rulings on talks with the EU. Keep it here on One News. Money Talks, I'm Cathy Yang. After years of reducing oil output, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC Plus, has decided to increase crude production for the third straight month. In a statement on Saturday, the world's largest oil exporters decided to produce an additional 411,000 barrels a day for July, 3 times greater than the group had previously planned. OPEC Plus cited a steady outlook and healthy market fundamentals as key reasons for the increase. In recent years, the group has been reducing crude production by 2.2 million barrels daily, but member countries accelerated the pace of output increase this 2025, adding 409,000 barrels daily for May and another 412,000 set for June. The moves pushed global oil prices down to around $60 per barrel, the lowest in 4 years. Trump's Commerce Secretary downplays the impact of recent tariff rulings and talks between the U.S. and the European Union. An unnamed EU official told Reuters the 27-member bloc has gained leverage after a federal trade court ruled Trump had exceeded his authority in imposing across-the-board duties. That ruling has been put on hold by a federal appeals court. Howard Lutnick acknowledged that the decision cost the U.S. week in trade talks, but he claimed negotiating countries eventually went back to the table.
You can't listen to silly people making silly comments. All of the countries that are negotiating with us understand the power of Donald Trump and his ability to protect the American worker. And so what they're doing is they're negotiating with us.
The Commerce chief further claimed China is slow-rolling a trade deal with the U.S. This comes after Trump accused Beijing of violating the agreement to mutually roll back tariffs and trade restrictions for critical minerals.
The right way to say it is they're just slow-rolling the deal. So I think slow rolling is the right way to say it, and I think Donald Trump is on it. We are taking certain actions to show them what it feels like on the other side of that equation.
Meanwhile, the EU is prepared to launch countermeasures after Trump doubled duties on imported steel and aluminum to 50%. Other countries expressed regret over the announcement. Canada's Chamber of Commerce called the move antithetical to North American economic security, while Australia's trade minister described it as unjustified. South Korea's exports fall for the first time in 4 months, hit by the global trade conflict triggered by Trump's tariffs. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, Seoul's exports dropped by 1.3% year-on-year in May to $57 billion. That figure is milder than the Reuters forecast of 2.7%. Shipments to China slid by 8.4%. Exports to the U.S. fell by 8.1% following steep duties imposed on foreign-made steel, aluminum, cars, and auto parts. The only bright spot from the data is semiconductor exports, surging by over 21% to a record $13.8 billion. U.S. markets ended the month of May a mixed bag, though stocks recovered most of their losses this year. The Dow rose by Friday by 0.1%. S&P 500 fell by less than 0.1%, and the Nasdaq slid by 0.1% as well. Amid constantly shifting policies and tariffs, U.S. markets were able to rebound this May. The Nasdaq gained by nearly 10% and the S&P by over 6%, delivering their best monthly performance since November 2023. Meanwhile, the Dow rose nearly 4%, securing its best month since January of this year. As for the 10-year U.S. Treasury yields, they've settled to 4.418% Friday, and gold prices have inched down to $3,288 per troy ounce. U.S. futures point to slight declines when the markets open later tonight Manila time. So you can see there, the Dow fell by nearly 0.25%, S&P sliding 0.25% as well, and the Nasdaq down nearly 0.5%. And Asian markets are mixed in the first hours of trading. Trump's doubling of tariffs on imported steel and aluminum impacting. In the first hours of trade, Australia's ASX is down about 0.1%, Kospi Index up, and the Nikkei 225 in Japan down by over 1.1%. Let's take a look at our own markets and check on the Philippine stock market and see in the first 15 minutes of trading, just 0.1% up there at 6,350. PSEI tumbled Friday by over 1%, with all the local counters taking a plunge except for mining and oil. As for the Philippine peso, let's take a look at the currency there. It's a slightly weaker open at 55.85 to the dollar. Peso closed Friday a tad weaker at 55.745 against the greenback. The record rise of coconut oil prices in the world is an even bigger threat than Trump's tariffs to the industry, says Axilum Chairman and CEO Romeo Chan. In my interview with him last May 14th, Chan explains on top of rising prices, a shortage in supply and low yields exacerbate the aim to export and meet local demand. Coconut products, especially coconut oil, are the Philippines' biggest export. With us for our continuing discussion on food security and sustaining the Philippines' competitiveness as one of the world's largest coconut-producing countries, Charlie Avila, the president of the Confederation of Coconut Farmers Organizations out of the Philippines, or CONFED, joins us live here in the studio. So good to have you here, Charlie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Annie. Good morning.
And lovely to see your book here. You've co-authored this book entitled Tragedy and Hope.
Yes.
It's a bifurcated title, and I'm really interested to know more about the tragedy because we could make a lot of improvements there, but there is hope.
There is
I
hope.
spoke with Romy Chan last
Yes.
May 14th, and he said that the tariffs weren't such a big issue. But then when you put that into context with the existing issues that the coconut industry faces, which
Yes.
include supply shortages, low yields, and also
Yes.
rising coconut oil prices, how much of an influence is Trump's tariffs having in the level of urgency in getting the problem solved in the coconut industry?
Yes. Okay. As you know, the coconut industry in the Philippines is one of the oldest industries around. When Magellan came over, it was there already.
Okay.
So there were some sampans or junks from Thailand, from Siam at that time. Now, all through the hundreds of years that followed, there came a time when the world discovered that it was the superior oil. So the world market took over. Now the system was put together whereby they could get from smallholders what otherwise they would not be able to gather together. And that was a system where the middleman was supreme, okay? The creditor trader. And so it produced a lot of money for processors and for the world market, and so much poverty for the farmers themselves, especially the workers, the landless workers, tenants, lessees, about 3 million of them. The biggest subsector in agriculture is that, as well as it is also the biggest exporter, has always been, still is, and without any subsidy.
So it's never changed then. It's always been a challenged story ever since
Always.
Magellan. And
Yeah,
we're talking
all
about
the way.
smallholders.
Yeah,
And I wanted to pick up on that because
Yes.
it's really the farmers
it's the farmers.
that we're aiming to help under CONFED.
Okay.
I know that the multi-sectoral group that you now head wants to
Yes.
help them.
Okay.
Help them plant coconut trees in order to increase supply and also increase yields.
Yes.
That's another issue. And also give them a market to sell
Yes.
to. How's that plan
I will
going?
just say this by way of replying to that there was an effort in the past that money would be put together, the Coco Levy funds, okay? The money came from the farmers themselves, not from the national treasury, okay? And that was big amounts. Who owned that? It took 30 years to determine. And the CONFED, the members of the CONFED were in the court saying it is ours. And the court finally decided that because these are tax monies, these are public funds. That because it did not come from the general public, it's a special fund. It's yours. You are the true beneficial owners. So government is trust owner. Owner in trust for what? For the coconut farmers, the true beneficial owners, with a purpose. The trust fund has a purpose, the development of the coconut industry. Now, a law was passed on how to utilize this. The farmers went to the Congress and fought it out, and they did not get what they wanted. Under the administration of the previous administration, he vetoed the farmers' version. Now, it is almost like the government owns the funds in an absolute way, almost. But they always use the word trust. However, the behavior is they own it absolutely. For example, the original strategy of government was a tripartite approach. They would have the PCA, Philippine Coconut Authority, to take care of the production and productivity. They would have an oil mills group from the Coconut Industry Investment Fund to take care of processing and trading. And they would have a bank, the United Coconut Planters Bank, to take care of credit facilities.
I wanted to pick up on that because I
Yes.
do see that you submitted a letter
Yes.
to PBBM
Yes.
of an executive order of a draft that you'd like him to sign. And
Exactly.
the key point there is to revitalize the UCPB as some
Yes.
sort of a fiduciary to
Yeah.
take care of these funds.
Because, Cathy, without a bank, without access to capital, to credit, the farmers are nothing. You know, people come from 5,000 kilometers away to give them money at high interest rates, but in timely fashion, and they take it at 5-6. It is an indictment of the fact that we say we have an agri-bank, but it does not exist. Now, when UCPB was taking over conferences illegally by Mayor AO of Mr. Duterte at that time, taken over by Land Bank for a merger, that was not even a merger. There was a buyout at very low price, 33 centavos per share. When even both COA and Punong Bayan were saying it was at 3 pesos something, and now they want to go to the market and sell at 347 per share. I mean, come on. If the law says the COCO levy funded assets were to be sold so that they will have more money, where is that money? They have not put it in the trust fund account. So we say, Mr. President, let's review this. We know that the buyout has come about. It is a fact. But there's something left behind there. Meron pang natitira. Kunin namin yun. For the farmers.
So as
Because
you wait for the President's response, ano pong
Yes.
ginagawa natin doon sa, babalikan ko lang yung doon sa pribadong sektor,
Yo po.
in helping the farmers find a market where they can sell fairly? Ano po yung ginagawa natin at ano yung progress in that?
Yung ginagawa natin is to make sure that they will finally have this bank. It's not there yet. It's still wholly owned by the land bank, the government. We're telling the president, maybe if you can put in, or Confed can help you, put in some more directors say, from the farmers themselves, and then come up with a real serious effort to put up an agri-bank, like Rabo Bank, like Baak in Thailand, you know. That's the secret of, the Netherlands, one of the smallest countries on earth, is the second biggest exporter of food and agriculture.
Okay.
Thailand, he has to send people to the Philippines to learn, but their bank is ready to help their producers. We don't have that. Now
right,
we're
but,
saying to the president, please, the original idea of your dad, let's do it. But it was taken over by Mr. Duterte before you.
Well, I hope he's heard you with that letter. And do let us know kung naaprubahan na po at pinirmahan na.
Yes, you will
Salamat
know
po.
ahead.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
Charlie.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. And thank you for the book.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Okay.
Charlie Avila of the Confederation of Coconut Farmers Organization of the Philippines, or CONFED. Coming right up, analysts say may inflation likely slow further. Just keep it here on One News. You're watching Money Talks on One News. President Bongbong Marcos has suspended the planned rehabilitation of EDSA, which was supposed to start this month. The rehab was initially set to start on June 13th, but President Marcos said the project could heavily affect commuters, especially if it causes severe traffic. He said they will allocate a month to study the new technologies that could possibly speed up the rehab process. MMDA Chairman Attorney Romando Artes says that because of this, they now have a chance to revisit the plan to make it more favorable to the public. Inflation likely slowed further in May to another over 5-year low amid the continued decline in food prices and a stronger peso. A Business World poll of 17 analysts yielded a median estimate of 1.3% for the May Consumer Price Index. This is within the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' forecast range of 0.9 to 1.7% for the month. However, this is slower than the 1.4% print in April and the 3.9% in the same month last year. If realized, this would be the lowest clip in more than 5 years since the 1.2% in November 2019. The Philippine Statistics Authority will release inflation data on June 5th. Bank lending in April increased to its slowest pace in 5 months as growth in loans to key industries eased. That's according to preliminary data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Outstanding loans of universal and commercial banks grew by 11.12% year-on-year to over 13 trillion pesos from the 11.9 trillion in 2024. The Bangko Sentral says this was the slowest growth in bank lending since 11.1% in November 2024. It also eased from the 11.8% year-on-year increase seen in March. The Bangko Sentral says this was because of the slower expansion in lending to industries including real estate activities, wholesale and retail trade, and manufacturing. Headlines from around the globe. In the U.S., a man set people on fire in Boulder, Colorado during a demonstration to remember the Israeli hostages being held in Gaza, injuring 6. The 45-year-old suspect is already in custody. Authorities said the man used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into a crowd of people. He yelled, "Free Palestine," during the attack. Victims, ranging between 67 and 88 years old, have been transported to local hospitals, with one of them in critical condition. Police believe this is a targeted attack. In Indonesia, at least 19 are dead after rocks collapse at a quarry in Cirebon. 8 people are injured and 6 remain missing, according to local police. Authorities are preparing charges for 2 people allegedly committed environmental law violations and workplace negligence. And in France, 2 people are dead and 192 injured as celebrations erupted after the Paris Saint-Germain won the Champions League for the first time. The euphoria over the victory led to more than 500 people being arrested by police. One of those who died collided with a vehicle, while the others sustained stab wounds. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. We're also streamed live on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. Have a great day ahead.